We're just walking over the crest of what possibly could be the remains of Hopton's work. Hopton's work was a substantial military earthwork in this area built by the Royalists. We've been further informed that the oak tree we see here is 500 years or so old. That would place it as being here in the Civil War. Once again, my imagination is stirred by whether we're standing on Hopton's work or we aren't. The fact is that the oak tree here was here in those days. So the men of the Civil War probably stood next to it. Again, that brings history down to the inch. Maybe we can see better here the crest of this earthwork. If it is an earthwork, or was it made when the school had the sports area behind it created? But irrespective of the fact this may or may not be the original Hopton's work, we know that it was on this area. So we are standing here in the middle of Plymouth heritage. Let's also not forget that when we're talking about the Civil War in Plymouth, we're talking about the creation of the parliamentary system we have today. Plymouth stood for Parliament. If places like Plymouth hadn't stood, we would not have a constitutional monarchy like we have today. So we owe our system of democracy in this country to Plymouth and the other places in the country that stood for parliamentary democracy. We mustn't forget that the people who huddled under this tree in 1643, had they succeeded, we would not have the freedoms of democracy we have today. To me, that's fantastic, that so much heritage could be around a tree. And a fine tree it is too. A tree that encompasses the history not only of our town, but of our land. It's a rainy, windy day, and I'm huddled in this tree. I can't help but feel the presence of others who huddled here in the 1640s and had on their mind, will the king win?
Right, I'm at WIDEY Court School with Sean, who's the site manager, who's kindly given us permission to come in through the school, have a look at some artefacts that were found in the field here. Some of them relating to the Civil War. I've seen some musket balls that were picked up in this area. We're at the site, once again, of Hopton's work, which we talked about before, built in January 1643 and used throughout the Civil War by the Royalist forces. Sean, tell us about this tree.
This tree is approximately 520 years old. It's 7 metres in diameter. So, and obviously, that's how old it is. It's stood a long time. It's quite big truss on it. It's been cut back over the years, pollarded by the Plymouth City Council. Yeah.
So this would have been here in the Civil War?
This would have been in the Civil War, yeah.
So Royalist soldiers moving around this area would have gone around this tree. Fortunately, didn't chop it down for firewood, because a lot of these forts, although they were occupied on and off throughout the Civil War, soldiers used the nearby woods. They would chop down trees for fortifying the earthworks, putting boards there for, like duck boards were used in the First World War. They had a similar use here for wood. They would make boards to stand on because the weather was just as it is today, raining, turning the fort into mud. The walls would have collapsed over the years. When the Royalists left this area, on and off throughout the 4 years of the Civil War, the soldiers from Plymouth, the parliamentarians, would have come out and levelled the works. So that side of it, at Southwell Street now it's called, there's a well there that during the Civil War...
What's over there, Phil?
Yeah, in that direction. Southwell Street is that way, isn't it, Sean?
Yeah, Southwell Street, yeah.
Next to Great Berry Road. There was a well there during the Civil War that they used for fresh water, the Royalist soldiers. At the end of the Civil War, when they finally withdrew in January 1646 from this area permanently, they threw a lot of the broken muskets and anything else they didn't need down that well. And they're probably still there to this day.
Perhaps we could look at the artefacts.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. I can't help but look at this earthwork here. Obviously, it's been cut into to affix these seats. But if you follow the line along, it cuts in with the other line of the earthwork there. So you really have to think, could this be part of Hopton's work? Whether this is really Hopton's work is not really here or there. We know it's in this area. So this landscape is our heritage. This landscape is responsible for the democracy and the parliamentarian system we have today. And yet it's hidden. How many people in Plymouth have a clue about this? It's lost. And I never understand why the official people who portray our city's history make no mention of all this. To me, it's just part of Plymouth's lost history. No matter how modern the place, there's always history to see. Here we've stepped right back in time. 2022 here. Centuries ago here. Part of the old wall of the original WIDEY Lane. History's never far behind in Plymouth if you open your eyes. Here we have some of the artefacts found in the school field. We've got bullets from World War II era 303s. Amazingly, pieces of anti-aircraft shrapnel. These items here are the driving bands of heavy anti-aircraft ammunition designed to make the projectile spin as it goes along the grooves of the rifled gun. What do we have here? Musket balls and a lead weight. Toys, coins, horseshoe, head girl, prefix badges, choir, coins, someone lost their keys, and coins from the 1700s to the early 1800s. Buttons. History in a case. Thankfully, the school has had the understanding to conserve and preserve these items for future people to see. So we have history in a box, and I mean real history in a box. It is widely presumed in Plymouth that there is no evidence left of WIDEY House, but you're wrong.
I'm stood in one of the doorways that was here during the English Civil War, at the time Charles I stayed at WIDEY Court in 1644 during his attack on Plymouth. He could have come through this very doorway, but we're not sure which doorway this is. It's quite a substantial one. If you look at the blocks on the bottom, and just in front of me there's two more similarly designed posts, granite posts, that could have been a gateway into the estate. Right, just in front of these, obviously this is not in situ, there's two gate posts here. The hinges are set in lead, and if you look at the decoration, it's very similar to the bottom of this doorway here. And there's a sign here just to the right of the doorway which
say,
reads,
Phil, it's exactly the same.
it is exactly the same.
Look at this here.
Yeah, but they're up that way. Could these be upside down? Could these be upside down? These bottom bits here? If you look at this, could it be upside down? I'm not sure.
That could have been reassembled upside down.
Could be, but then it fits in here okay. But if you look at the sign here, it gives you the evidence. It says this 17th century granite door frame was saved from WIDEY Court, which until 1954 stood nearby. In 1644, during the siege of Plymouth by the Royalist forces, King Charles I made WIDEY Court his headquarters. So this doorway, like I said, King Charles himself could have walked through here. And they preserved his bedroom for a long time after the Civil War.
What happened?
It was just kept as a room. This is where King Charles stayed during his brief visit to Plymouth, which incidentally he failed to take.
It's the weekend before Remembrance Weekend. So I think we should have a look at the wonderful work of the children here. Lest we forget.